Well, let's debate the latest developments in the Trans Mountain expansion standoff. From the foyer of the House of Commons tonight, I'm joined by four members of Parliament. Jonathan Wilkinson is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and a Vancouver area MP. Jamie Schmale is the Deputy Natural Resources Critic for the official opposition Conservatives. He's an Ontario MP. Sheila Malcolmson is the Women's Equality Critic for the NDP. She, too, is a BC Member of Parliament. And Elizabeth May is the leader of Canada's Green Party. And her riding is also in British Columbia. Thanks to all of you, first of all, for joining me for this important and ongoing conversation we're having in this country. And Mr. Wilkinson, maybe I can start with you. There's a new dog in the pipeline expansion fight now. Saskatchewan says it will join Alberta and also legislate cuts in oil exports to BC to punish the province for opposing the Kinder Morgan expansion. Do you welcome that added intervention from Saskatchewan, and where do you think it puts us now? And as a BC MP, do you support the actions of Alberta and Saskatchewan, and are you okay with paying more at the pump in fuel prices in all likelihood when you go back to British Columbia?
I think the premiers of the various provinces are doing what they believe to be in the best interests of their constituents. I mean, as the federal government, we have to look at what's in the best interests of all Canadians. The government, as you know, has approved this project based on work that was done not only through the NEB process, but through the interim principles, where we actually did significant additional consultation and looked at issues around things like greenhouse gas emissions. So,
but are you concerned where we're headed? Now Saskatchewan's in it, Quebec is in it, saying you better be careful with how you proceed. Are you concerned this risks being a bit of a constitutional quagmire here and perhaps a blow to the Federation?
Well, I mean, this is not a constitutional question. I've lived through the constitutional discussions that have happened historically in Canada. This is not a constitutional question. It's actually not a jurisdictional question. The jurisdictions are quite clear. This is an issue about projects once approved being able to actually proceed. This project was approved by the federal government. It was approved by the province of British Columbia. The proponent had gone forward on that basis, spending money, and at the end of the day, projects that once approved need to be able to actually be built.
Okay. Jamie Schmale, how does Saskatchewan's involvement change things, do you think? We have two provinces disputing, now becoming a three-province dispute, and maybe that'll grow. Does that concern you?
Well, I don't think it should have gotten this far to begin with. Had the Prime Minister gone out to British Columbia and brought the premiers together at that time, months ago, we would not be here. I think this failure lies completely on the lap of
Do you think we wouldn't be here, or we just would have been here sooner?
Oh, well, right now what we've seen is all sides digging in. Everyone's drawing a line, and now we've got so entrenched that moving either side is going to be extremely difficult, and that is a huge problem because that takes us beyond the pipeline.
What do you think the Prime Minister could have done sooner that would have changed the mind of John Horgan in BC? I suppose he could have said what the federal government planned to do several months ago, but would the outcome be any different just sooner?
Well, I think addressing it right on, head on, months ago wouldn't have led to this buildup that we're seeing right now. And this is where we're at. We're having provinces at odds with each other within our confederation. That is an enormous problem brought on by this failure of the Prime Minister to take a leadership role. This should have been dealt with years ago, or months ago. And to take the next step, now we're looking at investment as a whole within Canada being a problem. There are investors and companies watching this situation very closely and will make their decisions on where they put their dollars, whether or not it is in Canada, which used to be a safe place for investment. Okay. That is on the line.
Sheila Malcolm, what's your view of Saskatchewan's involvement now, and where do you think we are in this whole affair?
It's further evidence of how badly the whole country is suffering from the failure in federal leadership. I'll tell you a bunch of things that the Prime Minister might have done in the 2.5 years he's had the position that might have made the BC government, the John Horgan NDP government, more comfortable. He could have actually kept his promise on putting the Kinder Morgan pipeline expansion through a new and renewed, improved National Energy Board review, which include climate change considerations. He could have taken his own bureaucrats' advice 4 months before he actually approved the Kinder Morgan pipeline. He was told, Trudeau was told, that Indigenous consultation was a failure, was paternalistic and insulting. That's just been released in the last couple of days, but it's advice he got some time ago. And he could have regulated oil spill response times, which are disturbingly low. In my area, Salish Sea, where I represent, oil spill is allowed under federal regulations to not have any booming or containment for 72 hours. You're not in default of the federal law. And he still has not studied the science of bitumen and how it reacts in the marine environment. He's given coastal people no assurances. He had 2.5 years to, and he's failed totally.
Elizabeth May, the dispute's clearly growing now. How concerned are you about where it's all headed, with all sides digging in, including Indigenous groups who promise they'll do whatever it takes to block this project? We might, if we have time, we'll get to your situation. You're out there protesting. That's now going to be a criminal case against you. Where do you think this is headed?
I would hope that people would just calm down and do their homework. So much nonsense is spouted on this, Peter. I can't begin to tell you. If you look at the evidence, there isn't a price differential for bitumen if you get it to Tidewater. They're not going to get more money. There is not $40 million a day being lost. If people want to look these numbers up, you can. Just Google Scotiabank Fantasy, Vancouver Sun, and find economist Robin Allen breaking down the numbers for you, so we know exactly what the reality is. The smoke and mirrors game here is astonishing. And if you actually go back, and Sheila was suggesting it, do your homework. We don't know how to clean up bitumen and diluent in the marine environment. We don't have a business case for Kinder Morgan.
Okay.
We're on the verge of putting federal money into a fossil fuel project without any information that this is actually something that has customers, has investors. So I'd love people to calm down and actually study the evidence.
But we do have a process in this country. And
yes.
This project has gone through the regulatory approvals process, whether there's failings in them or not. A previous British Columbia government supported the project. The new government, we know, doesn't. But it's gone through the process. At what point does a federal government have to say, look, for not just these kinds of projects, but for all investment in Canada, has to say, look, if you've done it the way it's supposed to be done by the book and it gets approved, we'll back it?
It's not through the process, Peter. That's the key point. The Federal Court of Appeal heard 15 separate cases. They were consolidated and heard all at once in October 2017. They touch on constitutionality. There's no federal jurisdiction that trumps the constitutionally enshrined rights of Indigenous peoples. There's no federal jurisdiction that says that if interveners' rights, like me, like the City of Vancouver, City of Burnaby, if our rights were violated in the shoddy way that process was run on Kinder Morgan, a process that was so shoddy that Justin Trudeau, as candidate, said it was so bad no project could be approved that went through that process. We can be winning in court in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then there's no legal permit. And frankly, the idea that this is unprecedented, look at the U.S. Keystone is being challenged by Nebraska and people of Nebraska. That's what happens.
Mr. Wilkinson, let me have you respond to that. And can you tell us what exactly the federal government has in mind for using taxpayers' money to reduce the risk for Kinder Morgan? When are we going to know what it is we're buying into?
As I've said, I mean, this process went through a review both federally and provincially. It was approved through those reviews, including the additional interim principles that this government brought into place after it was elected. The proponent had moved forward, and ultimately, if you actually have projects that are approved and proponents are actually executing on the project, in order to have investor confidence for any investments going forward, you need to ensure that yes means yes. At the end of the day, we are focused on ensuring that the project gets built. There are a number of different options that are on the table to relieve the uncertainty that John Horgan and his government have created. A number of those are financial in nature, and we're working through those as we speak.
Okay, Mr. Smale, your party supports the pipeline, of course. It's been calling on the Liberals to take action to make it a reality. Is using taxpayers' money, because that's where we're headed, at least for some amount of time, to make sure this project goes ahead. Is that the right way to go?
Well, backstopping this project on the taxpayer dime should never have got this far. Again, they're trying to extend the timeline or cover up for their failures using taxpayer dollars, and I don't think that is a role that should have been gone.
But that's where we are there now. So are you saying they shouldn't be doing this? And what does that mean for the project if the Fed say we won't guarantee financial security at this point for Kinder Morgan?
Well, look, the Trans Mountain, have the money. They have private sector dollars ready to be used for this project. That is not even a question whether or not they need, taxpayer dollars to help them out. This would be the first project of this capacity to use taxpayer dollars to subsidize the program, and that is because of the lack of leadership of the Prime Minister on dealing with this project head-on months ago.
All right. Sheila Malcolmson, what's your view on this?
Prime Minister Trudeau was elected on a mandate for a renewed relationship with Indigenous people, to take strong, bold action on climate change, to protect and defend the coast, and he certainly has no mandate to invest in deepening fossil fuel infrastructure. I mean, I can't believe it's got to this point. I really can't. It's the failure in leadership is what's causing this alarm across the country, and we've got court cases ahead of us. We've got Kinder Morgan hasn't even fulfilled yet its National Energy Board conditions, and it doesn't even have an approved pipeline route. The ball's in Kinder Morgan's court on a whole bunch of areas, and Kinder Morgan's May 31st deadline set by Texas, that's not what we should be hopping to. We've got work to do in this country, and the Prime Minister should be here leading it.
Elizabeth Mayer, let me finish with you. There are now people today talking about the need to make sure there are not just financial backing from the federal government, but they're talking about the need for additional charges and costs for security, for police along the pipeline route for this project. I know you want people to calm down on all of this,
yes.
but that's what people are talking about now, that if the project goes ahead, where we could be in for some difficult times.
It's not too late to apply some common sense to the situation. There's a solution that helps the Alberta economy, and that's building upgraders and refineries in Alberta. There are reasons that the largest trade union representing Northern Alberta workers opposes this project, because shipping raw bitumen out of Canada is shipping jobs to refineries in other countries. None of this makes sense. And what astonishes me is the degree to which Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the federal government and the politicians at those levels are prepared to sort of enter into a stage of mass hysteria based on one press release from a corporation in Texas. Okay. Please, people, calm down and do your homework.
All right. Well, we'll see if everybody takes your advice, but I want to thank all you panelists for joining me tonight to talk about this. I'm sure there will be more to talk about in Kinder Morgan and pipeline expansion in the days to come, but thank you tonight.
Thank you, Peter.